So Campy, I was digging through my old stuff and I found something that I think you might... Why are you sitting in Nintendo Ninja's seat?
Oh, he knows. I asked him nicely and he was okay about it, since he kind of felt bad about the whole prank thing that he did last time, so he lets me sit here no problem.
I see. And where is he by any chance? Do you have any idea where he is now?
Well, he said he went to a book club, so I really hope he's reading all those good books. He said he's a very well expert book reader.
Yeah, I bet he's ripping through those pages like a madman. Anyway, so I found this, and I think you're gonna appreciate this, you know?
No, doesn't ring any bells.
Wait, really? You don't remember that? You don't remember such a really appreciated and well-received game?
I mean, is this Marvel vs. Capcom? Because I do remember Marvel vs. Capcom.
No, it's not Marvel vs. Capcom. No, it's not.
So I have no idea what I'm holding. If this is Marvel vs. Capcom, I mean, it says Capcom, but I don't even know what this is. So yeah, I can't really help you here.
Be glad that I took away the bat from Nintendo Ninja, right? Just bear that in mind, okay? Just keep that in mind. If nobody's gonna remember you, then I'm gonna make sure people remember, because we're gonna be talking about Tatsunoko versus Capcom, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Tatsunoko versus freaking Capcom. A game that apparently not a lot of people don't really know, because it was squeezed in. It was only exclusive to the Wii, and it was just squeezed in, like I said, in between Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So not a lot of people know about this underrated true gem of a fighting game. And I kind of lied to you guys when I said, oh, Tekken is the only fighting game I've ever played. Nah, man, even I forgot about how underappreciated this game is. And Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is legit one of the best fighting games I've experienced for the Wii. I know that I've said stuff about Tekken, but at the same time, I want to say some couple of things about Tatsunoko vs. Capcom as well, because, like I've said, not a lot of people know about it. And if I were to consider this into a review or into a video essay type of thing, honestly, this is more towards of like an appreciation of Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. So we're gonna put this more into like, I guess we'll just put it for a review. So let's get started with what we have to say about Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and then why it's very underappreciated. So to kind of give this game a short, sweet review, and I guess to kind of compliment it, this was the first fighting game that I've ever played, and I really have a nostalgia feel for this game, because not only was this my first fighting game ever, I mean, there was also Naruto and things like that you would normally get for the Wii, but as like a proper fighting game, this was the one that kind of made me appreciate fighting games as a whole and made me want to try out others like Tekken and then just Tekken. But my point is that it's a very underappreciated game. It really plays a lot like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 or like Marvel vs. Capcom in general. But instead of Marvel as part of the roster, instead of Marvel Comics, you have Tatsunoko, which is an entirely different manga studio, aside from like Shonen Jump and a bunch of others that we know and appreciate today. And it was kind of cool to see, like, instead of being Western versus Eastern style of like entertainment and culture, we had something that was both from the East, that was both from Japan, and I guess this was sort of like a love letter to to Japan as a whole, where it's like, we've made some of the best and iconic characters, and why not show these characters some of that spotlight in a video game setting that people will appreciate and enjoy. And a lot of that affected me a lot with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Like, I had no idea that there was an entirely different pool of unique and funny characters in the manga and things like that. It was just something unique to just see, period. And the fact that it was a Wii exclusive, I guess that's the reason why a lot of people don't really know about Tatsunoko versus Capcom, and only like the hardcore people that grew up with a Wii and wanted a fighting game and they ended up getting this, to them, this is how they appreciate it. They like, wow, I never really grew up with Xbox, I never really had PlayStation. I had the Wii, and then Tatsunoko versus Capcom came in and just gave me that love. And the Capcom roster is some of the best I've ever seen. Like, Mega Man Volnut made his first appearance here as a fighter. You had Roll, you had Zero. Zero also, I think, was the first fighter to appear here, unless Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was before Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Then obviously you had the Street Fighters. You also had some Omnimusha representation. You even had Frank frickin' West. I think Frank West was also the first person to show up here before Marvel vs. Capcom 3. My point is, this was a very unique cast of characters on both sides. And honestly, I can't really say much about the other side of Tatsunoko because it's not something that I kind of grew up with, but it's something that I definitely appreciate. I appreciate that they wanted to give their own unique characters and also kind of dive into the Capcom aesthetic that Capcom was obviously presenting for the game. And gameplay wise, it's your average Capcom style fighting game. You do the aerials, you do the regular combos, you do the raids. It's basically like Marvel vs. Capcom, but instead of Marvel, you have Tatsunoko. So that's basically how it is on the gameplay front. Visuals, it was pretty good for that era. For the Wii U, for that era, this clearly, and it says it on the box too, it won a lot. Best of E3, best of this, best of that. Games Award for 2009. This was in 2009. This was even 2 years before Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So yeah, Frank West, Roll, Zero, Volt, like there was their first ever appearances. My God, like that's incredible. But what was I saying? It's very underappreciated. I know it's a rambling point, things like that, and the visuals of this game was truly a unique thing for its time, especially for Wii, because the Wii, I guess, didn't really push to its limits. It was just trying to be this family-friendly game that people can all buy, and then if you really wanted to play games, then you obviously wanted an Xbox 360 and a PlayStation 3 at the time. And clearly that was the move during that generation. A lot of people didn't really want a Wii because the Wii just didn't have the games that they wanted to play. It wasn't fully third party like how Wii U and now the Switch has been doing recently. It wasn't that type of feel for the Wii. But the fact that Capcom said, we still want to make a game. We still want to have a fighting game presence, at least for the Wii. And let's give them just that. You know, we've been harsh on them. We never really give them the Marvel vs. Capcom treatment. So let's make something exclusive to the Wii and something that I know they'll appreciate and just enjoy overall. And Tatsunoko vs. Capcom really nailed that. As you can see with the rewards and the awards that I've gotten, it's just a really underappreciated game. Another thing also is that it kind of sucks that with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom that 10, almost 12 years later, there's no, I guess, there is a nostalgia of the game, obviously, there is that, but it's not the same as when people play Marvel vs. Capcom 3, when they play Guilty Gear or they play DB Fighters. You know, you can always go back to it because there's a bunch of features that are unique to that game. And obviously in the case of Fighters, and I think with Guilty Gear Strive, they're probably going to do some DLC. Arc Systems really knows how to make good 2D fighting games now. But with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, I guess it was just a one try, and even though it did really well, they just left it to the dust, I guess, to put it mildly. And it kind of sucks because this game is rarely talked about. And the reason I'm making this video and it doesn't feel as structured as all the others is because I loved Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. There's plenty of people that I'm sure when they click on this video, they will understand that either this was truly their first fighting game or this was their first time really experiencing a Marvel vs. Capcom style fighting game. And for me, it was clearly both. You know, I really enjoyed the cast of characters that were in it, and I really liked how unique and how aesthetically pleasing the game was. And this was for a Wii title. This game was so amazingly well done. And I just can't like say that enough about this game. I really enjoy Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. It really deserves a lot more treatment to it. And I know that there's like still FGC going on with it. I'm sure it is with all the other fighting games there are and things like that, except Smash. Nobody cares about Smash. I'm sure it has its presence there, but it's not the same when someone talks about Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and how much they love the aesthetic of the comic book-esque feel to that game, or Street Fighter vs. Tekken, which is kind of like another underappreciated game, or maybe just appreciated, just rated. You know, they talk back about it and they're like, wow, this game existed and we had so much fun playing that game, things like that, you know. And that's kind of what I want to present with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. That, listen, this game deserves a lot more love and support and treatment. And I guess because of the fact that it was just a Wii U exclusive and not a lot of people really grew up and understood the amount of love that this game had, they just couldn't make a sequel for it. Either that or Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, no, not Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, but Tatsunoko just doesn't exist anymore or something like that. I'm not really 100% sure, but if it does exist, if the manga is still live and running and their characters are still a thing, I really hope Tatsunoko vs. Capcom gets a sequel and just expand the array of characters that it already has, maybe add the Resident Evil cast of characters, continue on with the main roster, and maybe if they continue making new manga and the new manga characters, things like that, it'd be really cool. So yeah, I basically went on an extremely big tangent. I didn't really express too much of my love for this game, or I think I did, but it's just that Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is amazing. It really hits home for me. It's a really nice and nostalgic game that it just feels so well done. And I just hope that other games, or Capcom, you know, like, I hope Capcom comes back to this style of fighting games, you know, not the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 treatment. Go back to the Tatsunoko vs. Capcom style formula, enhance of what that brought, and just bring that back if you decide to make like a Marvel vs. Capcom 4, because Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite sucked. It really sucked, and I think to some you can argue they were trying to adapt to the Tatsunoko vs. Capcom style of the game, because instead of 3 fighters, you had 2, and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom only let you had 2 fighters. And so I think that's what Capcom wanted to do, and they just didn't end up doing it right. And considering that there's this huge Capcom, you know, redemption arc and the amount of ports that they're bringing to the Switch and things like that, I hope Tatsunoko vs. Capcom gets that same treatment. If we speak loud, then they will listen, and I hope that is the case with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. But enough of all that, enough of all of the potentials and all of this and that and things like that. Let's just hope that the love for Tatsunoko vs. Capcom stays strong, it keeps being amazing, and then let's just remind everybody that if you still have a Wii, go play this game. Really go play this game when you have a chance. And enough about that. On to the usual ending remarks. Keep being awesome. Keep spreading love and kindness into the world. I know you guys can. I know I can as well. That's why I make sure to do it as much as I can and as much as I want to, because it is very important. And just improving yourselves each and every day by 1%. Remember what I said, by 1%. And know that I love you guys forever and always to 120. And I hope to see you all in the next fantastic, amazing, spectacular, magnificent, beautiful, and sexy video. Alright, Campy, I'm gonna ask you a complete set of questions and answer me really honest, okay? So the first question is, do you remember Mega Man? Any Mega Man, from X to Battle Network, all that kind of shit. Do you remember Mega Man?
Yup, I remember.
Alright, first question down. Second question, do you remember Beautiful Joe? What about the other thing that Hideki Kamiya did, such as Resident Evil or the Devil May Cry series? Do you remember that?
I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't like Hideki Kamiya's work in Bomba-Beya?
Okay, third and final question. Do you remember Omnimusha? Do you remember all the other ambiguous titles that you've made, including Tatsunoko versus Capcom.
Sure, I do remember all of them, except that Tatsunoko versus Capcom, whatever. I honestly don't know which one is that one. I only know the SNK ones, and I know all of the Marvel versus Capcom ones, but what is this Tatsunoko versus Capcom all about? Like, are you referring to Tatsunoko from Guilty Gear Strive? Because that's totally not my, that is not my field of expertise, man.
Do you really call yourself Campy the Capcom man?